Welcome to the Checked Out Podcast, the official podcast of the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library. I'm your host, Jessica Renato, and I'm here today with Paula Brem-Heger, the Eva Jane Romaine Coombe Director of the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library, and Angela Hirsch, the Brain and Communications Director. This week, we're celebrating National Library Week.
Yay!
But before we get into that, since we're talking libraries, we're going to talk books up front this time. So before we get into all that, Paula, Angela, tell me what you're reading right now.
I am in the middle of Three Keys by Laura Pritchett, I think is the author. Very fascinating book, basically about a woman kind of searching for the second act of her life, and she has these mysterious three keys to three different cabins or like locations where she and her husband had vacationed, and she just like takes off and goes and tries the keys, breaking in, entering, and committing all kinds of little crimes, and it's really fascinating.
I do love an adventure story.
Yeah, it's an adventure kind of coming of age of a middle-aged woman, and I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
What about you, Paula?
Well, mine is a little bit different. I'm currently reading Chuck Klosterman's Football, which is a very fascinating look at football from not just a sports perspective, but sort of a larger media and evolution perspective. And the great thing about this book is it's totally a fresh perspective, and also led me to another book. Jim Thorpe is a great football player, great all-around athlete, and he actually won some gold medals in the 1912 Olympics. He's sometimes regarded as the greatest player. And in reading this, it led me to a biography of Jim Thorpe, Path Lit by Lightning, which I put on hold, so I'll be reading that. But I also have to give a shout out to one I just finished, which is so different. It's called Superfan by Jenny Tingwei Zhang, and it's an exploration of a college-age student who's kind of lonely and gets into a boy band, Hourglass, and this kind of unusual story about, again, media and how things have really evolved around that industry. I have to say, I normally wouldn't pick it up. Someone told me about it. It was fascinating. So two unusual books, but really, really worth digging into.
I also just finished an unusual book called Dig, and it is like a Southern Gothic horror novel, which isn't always my go-to, but I started listening to the little bit of the audiobook, and I couldn't put it down. It's about all these people who just start digging in their yards, and they're looking for something, and they don't know what's going on, and then the bees start coming out. Anyways, it's another really, really good one I would recommend. Okay. So three very different perspectives today at the table on what we're reading. All right, well, we're celebrating National Library Week, but before we dive into the data, why is this week such an important moment to talk about the value of libraries?
Well, I think everybody has some experience with libraries, public libraries in particular, starting when they're a kid on up to however they are, how old they are, and sometimes people kind of take them for granted. Not in a bad way, but they just don't really think about the library as a separate entity that exists. They just go there when they need something, and we're so good, our staff is so good at providing that sometimes we get a little lost in the shuffle. So National Library Week is this great opportunity to celebrate that, bring that forward, maybe have our community go, oh yeah, I do love the library. And as a matter of fact, our friends at the Ohio Library Council just did a statewide poll, and that really emphasizes this fact. The headline of that poll is 90% of Ohioans say libraries are important to their local community. So we know that, and this is a week where we say, hey, come in, let us know, tell us your stories, and really enjoy and celebrate your libraries.
Yeah, and I think another fact from that poll that really stuck out to me was that 87% of Ohio voters think that they are getting their money's worth in services from their local libraries. Yeah, it's a big win for us. And I love the fact that the results of this poll cross partisan lines. So it's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everyone in between. Half of Ohio voters also say that they or a family member have used the library in the last month. And I think there's this perception out there that libraries are not relevant, but clearly in Ohio, they are not only relevant, but they're very well used.
And I think just even entering into that conversation, yes, we talk about voting people, but even my own kids, I hear them say, we need to make buttons. Oh, we can go use the makerspace. And I love hearing that even in this younger generation, they realize what they can find in the library, and they know, we can do it for, free to a very small amount of money, which I think is so awesome. Sure. So when people think of public libraries, they usually think of books. What does the polling tell us about how Ohioans Ohioans experience their libraries in broader terms?
Well, broadly, we say books and more at the library these days. And I think that books kind of double for information literacy. We know how important that is in today's world. When I was a kid, you'd come down and you had to use a card catalog. It was a very different experience. Yeah. Information and learning and literacy were very individualized. I'd come down the day after Thanksgiving and hope that nobody had the S card catalog drawer I needed. But now information doesn't work that way. It's a more communal learning experience. So we really try and emphasize to everyone, we are at the root of it about books and literacy, but information, that's what we've always been about. To your point about what the poll indicates, 69% of Ohioans recall a specific time their library helped them personally. So you mentioned the buttons, we talked about books. There's so many different ways that the library helps them, and it might be through learning or literacy, but there are a variety of other ways that also happens.
Yeah, like for instance, you probably know this, Jessica, but on our blog not too long ago, we profiled a woman named Colleen McSwiggan, who is the founder of the Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub, and she came to our library. She did a bunch of things. She did got help with grant writing on their nonprofits, got her funding, was able to get help figuring out how to scale her organization, and she's launched her business, and she's saved more than 200 tons of materials from going in our landfill. So you don't think about that as something that the library is connected to, but we have tons of stories like that. So we're affecting different parts of the community in many different ways that people don't really realize.
And I love that story too, because we are a bedrock of support for nonprofits and businesses and small business folks. We're economic drivers. People come in with this idea and they want to try it out at the library. They want to use our makerspace. They want to use our resources, our grant center, to really have this opportunity to say, hey, I want to do this. I need to have some resources that are available right now that don't cost me a lot of money, that I can come in and begin exploring that. And we've seen that again and again, a variety of ways, where the library is part of that ecosystem of growth and development.
And even on this podcast, I know we've talked, and I've learned a lot through this, that we even help people get grants, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
All right, well, we are going to take a quick break and hear about some of the things happening at the library right now, and we will be right back.
Visit your favorite arts, cultural, and recreational attractions in Hamilton County for free with a Discovery Pass. With your library card, you can reserve a Discovery Pass for 15 local attractions, including the Cincinnati Museum Center and American Sign Museum. Learn more at chpl.org.
Did you know the library offers free printing? Print up to $5 of documents every day for free. That's 20 color pages or 33 black and white pages. Additional pages are only 15 cents a page for black and white or 25 cents a page for color. Learn more at chpl.org.
Welcome back to the Checked Out podcast. I'm here today with Paula, our director at the library, and Angela, our brand director. And we are talking about National Library Week. And we have been talking about all the ways the library helps the community. One stat that really stood out was how many people remember a time the library helped them personally. Why does that matter?
Well, libraries are there when you need them. And again, we talked earlier about they're reliable, people know where they are. I remember during the pandemic when the library was part of the groups that were providing the tests, the health tests, people said, oh, okay, I can go to the library. And almost everyone, even if they used the library recently or hadn't some time, they knew where a library was and they knew that the library was there to help them. We do that in a variety of ways. People come by to get their resume updated, to work with us, to work individually. I also like to point out that so few people have a printer at home these days. I don't really have a printer that works very reliably. I don't always have paper on hand. So they come to the library to do basic things, not only for themselves, but often for their small businesses. They will log in, they will do invoicing, they will print things, and that's all part of that unseen ecosystem sometimes of how we're supporting people when they need us. They come in at lunch from whatever they're doing and they do this work. So we offer that. We also offer offer homework help. We know how important that is. Literacy, early literacy, really school support as well. I was just talking to someone who, again, didn't realize the library had locations that offer the opportunity to apply for your passport. So those are all things that, we do. People, when they hear it, they're like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. But again, National Library Week is that moment to really bring that forward and make sure people are aware of it. Another thing I also want to point out is literacy. We talk about literacy all the time. And this year, we are, of course, doing those things that everybody remembers, story time. You came as a kid, you maybe brought your kids or family members or grandkids. We're also really expanding to offer some opportunity for people to come and hear authors. We have an author here in May, Matt Deneman, and we'll have more and more. We have our Stern Lecture every fall. So that literacy experience is so important. And we know that the current generation is really utilizing audio narratives. So we have our audiobooks. Those are probably people, I think, that are a little bit new and realizing they can do this so easily. This podcast is a great example of trying to meet people where they're at. I mentioned all of this to one of our younger staffers, and she said, oh yeah, we're the podcast generation. So I think that's a great example of how we're really trying to make sure people can access us however they're comfortable, whatever works for their lives.
Yeah. And we have one of our customers is a nanny. So she brought the 18-month-old that she's taking care of in, and she brings them to 4 story times every week.
That's amazing.
And that little one is learning how to socialize, is getting more than just literacy skills, but learning to build a love of learning very early in their life. We have, like I said, dozens of those kinds of stories of customers who use our libraries in a variety of different ways. You mentioned printing. I went to the library and printed my Christmas letter this year because I could do it for free. So that was one way that I used the library.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said too about different formats. I have, I talk about my kids a lot because I have a bunch of them, but I have one with learning differences. And I will say, even in her own school, her teacher, when we were struggling with some of the reading stuff, she's like, you should try audiobooks, and you can get them from the library. And so they got Libby set up on her tablet so she can start listening to them during school hours, and it has made such a difference. And all for free.
Absolutely.
All for free. So we have talked a lot about kids, families, working adults. How does the library serve older adults and seniors in our community?
Well, the library is for everybody. We talked about that, all stages of life. We know that. For seniors, you were talking about socialization. I think for seniors, many of them have been readers for a long time, but they get older, maybe they retire, their kids move out. They really can experience some level of social isolation. So the library can function in a variety of ways. That same socialization we see with kids has a different form for our seniors. We have a great senior lunch out at the Deer Park Library. We'll work with some local partners there, UMC, or Meals on Wheels, excuse me, and the Episcopalian Services there. They offer this, and oh my gosh, it's sold out. It is the hottest ticket in Deer Park, I think. And we were recently there with Representative Karen Brownlee came out and talked to many of the seniors, and they really shared this. It's important for them. They talked about sometimes they don't have great transportation. The senior centers they used to go to maybe have changed hours or closed. So the library has this amazing function. I also want to talk about, just briefly, our memory cafes. So when we talk about seniors, many of us know seniors, have seniors in our family who may be experiencing some level of dementia, and that can become very isolating, both for a senior and for the person who is their caregiver. So we have branches that offer this opportunity for people to come on in and do things that really help them feel supported and help them socialize wherever they're at. And this is a great example. When I talk about this at community presentations, almost always I have somebody come up afterwards who may not want to share with the whole group, but says, my family's experiencing this. Can you tell me more about that? Again, the library is there. People come for the program, but they check out material and they do a lot of other things. But we are an anchor in folks' lives, particularly as they're aging and feeling some of that social isolation.
Yeah, that's part of, again, the services that we help with, but people don't think about, like reducing isolation and supporting healthy aging, making sure that our spaces are welcoming for people of all ages. We did profile one of the folks who goes to the Deer Park branch, a 94-year-old customer named Janet, who goes to that lunch and who talked with us about it's one of her only opportunities to get outside and socialize, and that the library has really made such a difference in her quality of life.
And we also had a podcast recently recently with our outreach staff, and they talked about how they do book clubs for seniors and help them get the books that they need to, again, to your point, Paula, form these communities and talk about these books, which I just think is so cool.
Absolutely.
So the poll also shows libraries are among the most trusted public institutions. What do you think drives that trust?
Well, you've said it a few times, Jessica. We are very accessible. We've worked really hard the last couple of years to make that true, also in our buildings by working on accessibility and having better parking, better ways for people to get into the building, and we are for everyone. So we do offer a wide variety of things. We don't maybe offer all of those individually. We have very strong partnerships that allow us to reach into communities in that way, and we are staffed by people who are very community-centered. Libraries are community-focused, community-centered. Our staff members know those. Many of our managers go to their local community council meetings to make sure everybody's informed, including their elected or their civic infrastructure in that community too. 87% of the respondents to that poll we've been talking about say that they get their money's worth from libraries for the taxes they pay. Now, we know in Ohio right now, property taxes are a real issue. And just this past weekend, we had a big opening at our Sims Township branch. I was talking to one gentleman who was there, and he said, hey, I do pay property taxes, and I like to come to these things because I can see where my taxes are going. And really, I think that really speaks to, yes, people are concerned about this, and they do understand that the library provides real value for those dollars.
Yeah, and once again, one of our customers, her name is Katie. She's a homeschool mom, and she uses our Discovery Passes. If you're not sure what those are, they are passes that allow you to go to like museums and other attractions for free from the library. We also have a very popular telescope lending program, and so homeschooling can be very expensive, especially when you factor in they need to do science and do some shared family learning. Those are all things that cost a lot of money, but the library is here to support that part of the community too. We actually calculated how much Katie had saved checking out books and materials, and it came out to more than $89,000.
Wow,
so that's the value
incredible.
of all the materials, the programs, and the experiences that she and her family were able to access over time.
I think that speaks to how libraries turn these things into real opportunities, and of course the makerspace demonstrates that a little bit on the business side. People come in, and we've had people who started by saying, I did this banner in the makerspace. Now 2 years later they come in and they say, I have a much more extensive business, but I wanted to let you know I wouldn't have had that opportunity without the library being a place I could begin my thoughts on how would I market this, how would I do this. So we really do that. We turn that investment into something real for people.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to take another quick break to hear about some things happening at the library, and we will be right back.
Do you need a private space for studying or a meeting? Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library offers free meeting and study rooms for reservation. Available at most library locations. Learn more at chpl.org.
To expand access to STEM-related learning tools and materials, the library has partnered with the Library Foundation and Dean Regas to circulate 15 telescopes for use by library cardholders. Telescopes are available at 15 locations, and each can be checked out for a 7-day loan period. Learn more at chpl.org.
Welcome back to the Checked Out podcast. I'm here today talking with Paula, our library director, and Angela, our brand director, about National Library Week and all of the great things that you can find at the library. So let's talk about value. What does the data say about the return on investments libraries provide?
I think my favorite stat on this that I like to banter around all the time is for every dollar invested in libraries, you get $4 back in return. I don't know what other kind of investment you can get with that kind of return. I've worked at a lot of different places. The libraries are very efficient. Everybody from Paula on down is very focused on getting the most out of all of the dollars that we receive from the public. We take that stewardship very seriously. And so we stretch our dollars through partnerships and shared resources. And that economic return really matters because it shows that investing in the library is a really smart way to invest your money.
I love that too because it's a statistic that actually our current board president Diane Cunningham repeats all the time because it's one sentence and you can say it and people get it and they also hear it because they see that in their day-to-day lives. And we leverage all these partnerships to really not only forward what we're doing but what many community partners are doing that sometimes don't have quite as much visibility. We work with the county, 513 Relief Bus. We try and make all of that really accessible at the library. So I think that's such an important thing to point out. Partnerships, the Cincinnati Museum Center is one group that we've partnered with for many, many years. We did some tech bundles where we distributed Chromebooks, hotspots to families and seniors, delivered sort of this one-on-one support in a couple of our neighborhoods that really needed that. So we understand that access to the internet is so important. Not everyone has it or reliable access, so that is one thing that, again, to Jessica's earlier point, people say, hey, what's the library doing? Well, in the internet age, not everybody is at the same spot. So libraries do tend to level that playing field. 71% say libraries provide basic everyday services. So we see that and we know that. And people visit their library. 2/3 of Ohioans say they recently have visited a library. We are, in fact, infrastructure, civic infrastructure. We're not sort of a nice to have or a need to have element.
And kind of a random fun fact, but I think it's really important here is at the library we look at our Clifton strengths, and I have found over and over again when I ask people what theirs are, without fail, Maximizer is in the top, and that is somebody who does a lot with what they have. And I think that what you said really speaks to the staff who care so much here at the library.
Yeah, for sure.
So, do people understand how libraries are funded?
I know. I challenge you. Who here can do it? 25 words or less.
Yes, exactly.
People love all of this, but it's such a complicated thing, and you don't always think about it. Talking about National Library Week, it is a chance to sort of get, how does that happen?
Exactly.
It is, and there are many different kinds of fundings for different organizations and institutions across Ohio. So here, we really only have two ways we're funded. State for the Public Library Fund and those local property taxes I mentioned earlier. So, I think people do need to understand we get some support from the state, but we don't get sales tax, we don't get income tax, we just have this one funding stream and then their local taxes. So I feel like the library here has had local property taxes since, I think 2009 was the first one we passed. And it really makes us go out and make sure we're accountable to our community. We go out and do listening sessions. When we did our facilities master plan, we went out and talked at all 41 of our public locations. So we really take what they say and we translate that. And Sims Township is a great example. We had multiple meetings with those folks and really design that community library with the community input in mind.
Absolutely. And I know earlier when we first started talking, we talked about how we often take our libraries for granted. And this National Library Week is a time to kind of put a spotlight on that. So what do you think is at stake when people take libraries for granted?
Yeah, I worry about reduced funding, of course, because that is going to mean we're going to have fewer programs, we're going to have to probably do shorter hours, and our community will probably have less access to things like technology, grant writing, homework help, all of the things that we've talked about already on the podcast today. And just remember that libraries are foundational, not just to reading, but for a bunch of different areas that impact, I would say, pretty much everybody's life, education, workforce development. Even if you're not directly involved in workforce development, the community that you live in, when that workforce thrives, then you thrive. So we have a part in that too. And then just that community connection. I would want to remind people that 71% of people in that survey said that libraries provide basic services. So we're talking about if funding is reduced, a lot of those basic services, there's no other place in the community that provide those. We are the ones that do it. So that is really what's at stake.
I think that's so true. And right now, funding here in Ohio, across the country, is always a discussion. And I think we don't want people to assume libraries will always be funded in a way that allows us to leverage other partnerships and do these things. So keeping that in mind during National Library Week, going into a library and thinking all the things you get, again, Maximizer, all the things you're getting for, the value of those dollars is so important. I think we're right at the top. We see that from people who take these kinds of surveys and really report that, and we know that from what they tell us as well.
Yeah. So we covered a lot of things during this conversation. During National Library Week, what is one thing you want listeners to do or remember?
I think that libraries are essential. Angela mentioned this. We are part of the civic infrastructure, and without libraries, I think communities would be devoid of some really essential services. So everyone's library looks different, and here we have many different kinds of libraries. In the public library system, we're one consolidated library, which makes us very efficient, but you can go get a different experience. So I would say go to a library, maybe one you go to all the time or one you haven't been to in a while. Take a look around, really look at what you're getting, think about what it's meant to you throughout your whole life, what it means to you now, and then let us know.
Yeah.
You know, use your library. Angela loves to hear the stories. She's been reporting those. Tell people what libraries do when you are out and about. Attend a book club. Do something that really engages you with the library.
Yeah, we have a lot of great content that we post on social media. People can always go on social media. I think we would love it during National Library Week and tell us how they use the library and what the library means to them. We would really appreciate that. And, you know, in the past, some of those messages have included the names of staff members, and we'll make sure to pass that on to those staff members, because we know there are certain sections of the community that have like a really strong connection with the staff members by name at their branch. So I think the staff members would appreciate hearing that too.
And go back to your original question when we talked about what books we're reading. Would I ever go out and buy Football or Superfan? I might not. I mean, maybe if someone's like, you really need this book. But it's so wonderful at the library. You can explore all of your different interests. And, you know, I'm reading one book and then I'm like, I need to read a biography of this person. You can put them on hold, and you really get to expand your knowledge and your point of view through the library in a way that if we didn't have those resources, it would be not such a robust experience, not such an opportunity for casual and formal learning.
I agree, and even with kids, you know, they do all this reading at school, and they're constantly needing a new book and needing a new book and needing a new book, and while I would love to be able to supply them with every book they want, it is so wonderful to be able to put something on hold and just pick up whatever they need.
That's right. It's like Christmas morning when you get your holds.
It really is.
Right.
Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Angela and Paula, for being on the podcast today. And thank you for listening today. We'll hope you tune in next time for our next episode of Checked Out. Checked Out is a podcast presented by the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library. It is produced by Paul Wellington, sound engineered by Steve France, hosted by Jessica Renato, and supported by the CHPL brand team, as well as the hundreds of library staff across Cincinnati and Hamilton County. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.